Lillian DeCloe lived a quiet, peaceful life in her Pompano Beach home until one day in April 1994 when violence and rage broke in through her bedroom window.
My first thought was, who did this? Who did this?
The attacker viciously beat, raped, and murdered the harmless 89-year-old woman.
The police arrived. They declared it homicide.
For more than 27 years, Lillian DeCloe's killer was unknown, and the case went cold until now. Detective David Towsley with the Broward Sheriff's Office Cold Case Homicide Unit reopened DeCloe's murder several years ago. That launched a journey through old case files, through DNA databases, and through evidence recovered from the crime scene, like the nightgown Lillian was wearing when she died. The journey eventually led to the grave of a former United States Marine.
When I first got this case in 2019, I never thought it would, result in anything like this.
The result? The identity of Lillian's killer. A man who once lived just a few houses away from her home. After nearly 3 decades, Lillian's family finally received the answer they prayed for, and they learned that her murder case is now closed.
I know wherever she is, she can sleep in peace.
Lillian DeCloe spent her professional life working as a teacher and as a nurse. She dedicated herself to helping others. June Nicholas is one of her nieces.
She took care of most of us.
As Lillian aged, June helped care for her aunt as Lillian experienced health challenges and her memory began to slip. On Saturday, April 29, 1994, June arrived at Lillian's home in the late afternoon.
I called Auntie, where are you? I checked the first bedroom, which she normally would, take her naps in, and finally I went down to the end of the hall, and as I looked right, I saw her on the floor.
June called 911. Officers with the then Pompano Beach Police Department responded and discovered that Lillian's attacker likely entered through a bedroom window. They found signs of a struggle and a ransacked home.
There was no indication that she was specifically targeted for any reason. She didn't have any enemies. It just appeared to be a burglary gone bad.
The killer attacked Lillian and strangled her to death.
She had contusions pretty much everywhere. Her wrist, her ribs were fractured, her nose was fractured.
At the time, detectives developed potential suspects in Lillian's murder and circulated reward flyers asking the public for help. But the leads dried up and the case turned cold. The violent death of her beloved aunt left June Nicholas in a state of grief.
I took a whole year off of work just to cope. I had someone else take care of my kids for about a couple of months because I couldn't cope. It was that bad. I would lay in my bed and I would see her on the floor.
One item collected from the crime scene stood out: Lillian's nightgown. By 2004, the Broward Sheriff's Office had begun providing law enforcement service to Pompano Beach and had taken over Pompano Beach's cold cases. It was that year when BSO detectives had Lillian's nightgown retested, and semen was found on the garment.
They ran that back in 2004 in the CODIS database and didn't get a hit.
Even though a search of the National Criminal Database did not yield a suspect at that time, the evidence helped BSO create a suspect profile and created suspicion that Lillian's killer sexually assaulted her. Detective Towsley looked at the case anew in 2019 as part of BSO's newly created Cold Case Unit. Based on advancements in DNA technology, he had a hunch that DNA might reveal who killed Lillian. In 2021, BSO's crime lab sent the sample gathered from Lillian's nightgown to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for additional testing. It was used in a familial search against the Florida DNA Investigative Support Database, which contains the profiles of arrestees or convicted offenders. In this case, The DNA from the crime scene shared sufficient genetic similarities to a known offender in the database. Further investigation led to the known offender's biological father, a man named Johnny Mac Brown, as an individual who may have deposited that DNA.
They concluded that there was pretty much only one possible answer, and it was most likely the father that was responsible for this.
He was a Vietnam vet who, according to his family members, suffered from PTSD. He had went homeless for a number of years, and he had a drug habit. At that point, it was looking stronger and stronger that he was going to be our guy.
Detectives also uncovered a critical clue that in the early 1990s, Johnny Mac Brown lived just a few houses down from Lillian DeCloe. Detectives could not question Brown because he died of natural causes in 2010. He was buried in the South Florida National Cemetery in Lake Worth. Ultimately, the decision was made to exhume Brown's grave. This past August, BSO worked with the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office, and a forensic anthropologist to carry out that process.
We did it professionally and with as least disruption as we possibly could.
Experts took several tissue samples from Brown's body, and BSO criminalist Jennifer Parker tested them in BSO's crime lab. She compared them to the existing DNA suspect profile.
When I went to go back to the rib bone, I was able to scoop out part of the bone marrow inside of the rib, and that actually gave me the best profile. I can do comparisons back to the unknown samples in this case, and that actually gave me, a match, if you will.
So we knew 100% that we had the right guy at that time.
BSO's crime lab says the DNA results are 66.8 trillion times more likely that the DNA found at Lillian DeCloe's homicide scene came from Lillian and Johnny Mac Brown than if they came from Lillian and someone else. June Nicholas and Lillian's family are grateful for the dedicated detective work of David Towsley and other members of BSO's Cold Case Homicide Unit. They now know who took this precious woman from them.
We're glad that it's closed. We can move on. We can die in peace because we know that it wasn't a murder that was unsolved.